My name is John French, born in 1951, so I'm 65 and just happily retired. I was born in country Victoria. I spent most of my life there. I spent a year overseas in the late 60s in the Philippines. Came back to Australia and then a year doing engineering and eventually got a job as a photographer in Melbourne. Growing up on a dairy farm is a bit different to my life now, but it was a good start, and I grew up with an older sister and a younger brother.
Just how did you get started in photography?
My quest as a young fellow was to become a policeman, believe it or not, even though I was studying engineering. It always interested me. And the main part in police photography was ballistics, and a major part of ballistics is photography. So when I was studying in the Philippines, I did criminology and really got into the photography. Came back to Australia, unfortunately too short. Then for the police force, they had height requirements. And so I went on to do the engineering, see how I'd go. Saw an ad in the paper, they wanted cadet photographers. Out of 300 applicants, I was very lucky. I was one of four that was very lucky. So, yeah, I got a job, and the rest is just about history now.
Where was that job at?
That job was at the AGE. Yeah, I started at the AGE as a cadet, did my 4-year cadetship, and lasted 36 years.
Something that I found, John, like if you're covering a news story, like you became very good at reading the story and sort of working out, where to be and get in the right position, when you recall what the other photographers are doing, and you try and read the story and get to where you needed to be. Did you find that, or it's like a sixth sense that?
Yeah, when you're covering a news story, you've got to think about a lot of places of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But really, after a while, it's a sixth sense. In my early days, I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going, but I was very lucky to have senior photographers around, like your Clive McKinnon's working for the opposition. So it was always really nice. And you learn very quickly of how to do it and where to be. And then you also had to really think about what gear you were using, what lenses, what flash did you want flash, and everything like that. And, what your background was going to be, or you didn't want your background in it. Yeah, so you thought of everything sort of rushed to you very quickly. Then the adrenaline set in and you were quite happy, just point that camera, and in the old days you had to pull your focus as well. It wasn't all automatic for you, but you really worked. But to cover and get it right, and you had to be spot on. It's always nice when you jag that one shot, that especially in the old days when you were pulling focus on a big lens, and you've got it and you go, thank you, but you're never happy until you were back in the office, because you couldn't look at it on the back of the camera. You had to wait till you exposed that roll of film and waited for that film to dry in the cabinet, and then you put it in the enlarger and say, oh yes, it's sharp. I think one of my very early big stuff-ups in my very early career, I had to, Prince Charles was out in Australia, and it was out for somebody's funeral, and I can't remember whose it is at this stage, but anyhow, I'm on night shift and walk in the office at 7 o'clock, and I say, oh, you've got 20 minutes to get down to Government House to photograph Prince Charles, sorry. Oh, okay. So you charge down there, and it takes you, it's 7 o'clock at night. There's still enough traffic around. Take you all the time to get to the gate. They'd already closed the gate, wouldn't let me in. Then they said, oh, yes, you can go in now. Run half a kilometre up the driveway, and then you're hunting around, pick up my camera, and looking around at everybody else where I should be, not even half ready. And next minute they said, it's all over. I said, yeah, we're waiting for him to come out. Oh, you just walked out and got into a car. I glanced to the left and bang, he'd walked out. So everybody got one shot. I got nothing. But thank goodness, John Lamb was standing outside the church or something, and down in the city, and got plenty on him. But I thought, wow, that's, sort of last minute not being prepared or being unprepared, and I was gone.
And I'm sure sitting on the desk you heard some classic stories from...
Yeah, you hear some... Oh yeah, you hear it's like, I had a bit of gastro, and you had to, I had to go to the toilet. That's why I wasn't there behind the camera, and I missed that wicket. Or people always make excuses, but you always got to think everybody's human. If they do make a mistake, especially being on the desk, always look at them. If they do make a mistake or they miss it, it's no use yelling at them or growling at them. There's no fun in that, because they're hurting enough inside. They missed a picture. photographer, a real photographer, a real press photographer, never wants to miss a picture, and it hurts him for the rest of his life that he did. So that is the main thing, sort of. It's you want to have fun while you're on the job, and if you miss it, well, you're hurting enough.
Do you have a most meaningful photo, that one that really stands out to you?
Medical photograph.
Meaningful.
Oh, meaningful.
One that you're really
Um,
proud of.
No, I've got a few photographs on the wall at home, and I think they're really all sport. Meaningful for me, I think it's clean and sharp, and it's a nice picture I love to look at. But I love people being in photographs. So all mine are of people in sport. So it's and probably in all those sportsmen, I think I've got to know them. I've met them a few times. We say hello. It might be like one of the Williams sisters from the tennis. This year at the Australian Open, basically walk past, hello, and they say, oh, hello, how are you? You see them once a year, but they still say hello to you. So it means a lot to me. And I've got a pearl of a picture of them. So it's, that's what means a lot to me. At the age and I think, at the Herald Sun is exactly the same. At the age, we have a thing called the Blackie Awards. It's Christmas awards, or usually post-Christmas, because everybody's busy before Christmas. Your post-Christmas awards for the silliest thing a photographer has done. I've won it once, been nominated several times. But I think, the memorable things is one of our class photographers, Bruce Postle, which, was a guy I looked up to, and I think I still do as a photographer in his career. And he helped me immensely to get my career going, but I tried not to follow in some of his footsteps. But I get this phone call from this guy one day from Ballarat, and he said, oh, I've picked up this camera lens. And I said, oh, yes. And he said, yeah, and it's got the Age newspaper on the side of it, and it's a 300mm lens. I thought, oh, that sounds very nice. Oh, it's in a lovely case and everything. So I think I think I might know who had that lens. And he said, oh, I'm coming back to Melbourne. I'm going driving right past the Age. I'll drop it off. Oh, well, that'll be very appreciated. Knowing it was Bruce Postle who'd left the lens behind. But when I met the guy, he told me, oh, he left the lens behind. He just drove off. It was sitting right behind the back of the car. And I went to drive out and he ran over it. So I kept it in my locker for about 3 weeks until Bruce eventually was needing a lens. And I said, oh, where's your 300? Then he had to admit he had lost it. Took him 3 weeks, so it made him suffer for a while before I gave it back to him. But Bruce once again won another award there. That every year everybody's trying to get this picture of these little baby ducks going across the road with mum and dad, and always makes a lovely picture, cars in the background, and the city buildings and everything. And I think Bruce went out hunting for it every year. But so he's there, and he gets these ducks. He couldn't find mum and dad, so he gathers up all these poor little ducklings and puts them into a box and puts them in the car and takes them off to the zoo. I think, if they let them go, then mum and dad would have found them. But anyhow, this is Bruce. So he gets back to the office and say, yeah, right, okay, Bruce, you got some nice pictures. And he said, oh, yeah, I think I took a picture. So he goes and, sort of wants to pull rolls of film out of his top pocket. And I said, yeah, and the other jobs you've just done? And he bent over, picked up the ducks, and such a fluster picking up all the ducks, he loses all his film. So that was a very nice morning for Bruce to go out and reshoot all his jobs. But that goes on and on with things like that, people doing silly things and unfortunate things.
You sort of mentioned a few photographers before, but who were your mentors when you started off at the Age?
I think when I first went for the job and I saw it in the newspaper, press photographer, and I didn't really follow press photography. I was into photography, not knowing anything about press photography. I was a little boy from the country, from a dairy farm, and I was looking at doing criminology. But then I sort of started looking at the paper very quickly, and names like John Lamb and Bruce Postle jumped up at me. So I get to Melbourne and, find somewhere to live and start work and everything. And these two guys are in and out of the office every 5 minutes. So took a bit of a shine to them, and they become a very close part of my life, especially my early life, and still extremely close friends. So, for quite a few years, I looked up to them, how they did things, the way they did to them. But one other very, very special person in my life as a young fellow was Clive McKinnon. Clive had left the Age the year I joined, and he went to work for the opposition at the Herald Sun. And he's something I've always worked on, that on my very first job, and I was there, and he could see I didn't know what I was really doing, and I was trying very hard. And he pointed me in the right direction. And he did that on many occasions, and always beat the backside off me with a better picture, because I wasn't looking or listening or thinking or whatever, and he'd beat me. But he always helped out where he could, but made sure he could still beat me. And I thought that's very good, and I've always maintained that. You always help the juniors, no matter where they're from, because it's when they're really pointing that camera and thinking that you're going to win or lose.
I've heard this question before, but there was a Chicago Sun photographer called John H. White who was sacked a couple of years ago, and they got rid of all the photographers from the paper. And he does this great interview. It's like a 4-minute interview, and there's some great lines in it. But one of the things he described the photographer was the eyes of the nation. So you're reporting things for what's happening in your country or your town or whatever, and you call yourself a visual servant. How did you see yourself as a photographer in society? What you were doing in society?
It's a little bit difficult. I think, when you're out there on the road, you're not thinking about whether you're in the army serving your country, or you're working for the National Library, making sure every minute has to be recorded. I was out there paid to have fun, because it was the greatest job out, and I still think it was one of the greatest jobs I've ever done in my life. I look at it as I had to record the news. And when you're on a news job, or no matter what, or even if it was a feature job, you're still recording the news of the day or what's happening on that day in your little pocket of the world, I suppose. And I wasn't there to be the National Library or anything like that. I was out there to have fun and take photographs, and that's why I've tried to teach people.
Can you just describe the changes that happened in technology and the gear as you went along from your first camera to the last camera?
Changes in technology in newspapers has been immense in the last sort of 50 years, and it's been a big forte for me. Like I said, when I first started, I started on a twin lens Mamiya. A year later, we were into using 35mm, and then it was Nikon. And we're printing black and white in the darkroom on graded sheets of paper. And then 10 years of doing that, then we changed to what they call multi-grade in paper, where you could just turn a dial on the enlarger, and it'll give you different grades, different contrasts into your paper. And then we moved into colour. Now, all the rest of the world was saying, oh no, we have to shoot colour transparency, the only way you can get great separations and things like that. And I thought, this is all just too difficult. We shot transparencies for a couple of years on special projects, but I was really against it. And then I was in a part of management, so I was able to fight it a little bit and say, no, we're going to shoot colour negative. And a few agencies started to do it also. So I was right up the forefront of that. And we went colour negative, and we did colour prints and made them do the separations from the prints, because we still bring in the photography how we wanted to see it. And that worked very well. Newspaper after newspaper around Australia followed what I did. I wish I had a quid for everything they ripped off that I did and copied, but that's life. We moved into, we're shooting colour film and doing colour prints. And then all of a sudden, that lovely world of digital came along. I started shooting digital back in the early 90s. In 92 was the first time we picked up a digital. It was a camera with a great big suitcase attached to it. So that was quite interesting. And then in 96, at the Olympics, we hit it very hard with a couple of digital cameras. They were very small quality, but we managed to make it work. And then by 98, I had the Age. We were the second newspaper in the world to go completely digital. The Toronto Star was ahead of us by 6 months, and then we were the second newspaper in the world to become digital in 98. And 2000, all of Fairfax was digital for the Olympic Games. So we've just grown on the quality of digital cameras from there to now, and it's been quite immense. And I think about 6 years ago was where the first digital camera really started to replace the quality of film. And now, of course, it's just immensely ahead of it.
What about just different cameras that you use over the years?
Like I said, my first camera was Mamiya, and then we moved to Nikon. Stayed Nikon until very early 90s. I think 94 we changed to Canon. It was against my will at the time, and I was head of the Age in Melbourne, and somebody else was the head of Sydney Morning Herald, but Sydney Morning Herald was the master paper then, and they said we're all changing to Canon. So they forked out all the money that we wanted and gave us all the gear we needed. So we moved over to Canon, and I've been Canon ever since. But once you were shooting film in the early days, very basic autofocus in the early 90s, and the late 90s, autofocus really picked up with the digital cameras coming out, and now it's just it's all brilliant, and the lenses are starting to become smaller and lighter at long last. It's making it work. But we've all stayed Canon, and I'm too old to go back to shoot Nikon, and it doesn't really matter much now. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Oh, the future in newspaper photographic work, I don't know where the papers are actually going. I think I hope there's going to be a resurgence. The suburban newspaper group is where we were doing really well a couple of years ago, but the management decided to strip that and try and put it all back into the major dailies, and they failed badly. So the numbers of photographers are drastically fallen. But the online side of it, and the online side of it has been running for nearly 20 years now, and they've neglected it, and they're trying to play catch up. And that data field is really hungry for pictures. It really is. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of work there. If that really does come on the way, I expect to see it, and it does become an art field instead of just a happy snap field. It'll be very good, because you've got to remember, newspapers, what I grew up with on broadsheets, like your page 3 picture, your page 1 was news, your page 3 picture was a huge art picture. Take out, so sometimes half the page, at least a third, of the top half of the paper. So it's, I think that art field will come back when people start picking it up, and they're still going to want their news, because your TV news is so parochial and so limited, and done so badly. I think you will get people wanting, some good news, and of course good news has got to have good photography. It might be a lot of video, but also there will be good stills. So I think there's still a future there. It's just the way they're going to shape it.
And what advice would you give to someone that was starting off and wanted to get into the photojournalism?
Advice for a photojournalist is you never know what to say. In my last interviews, I've always asked them, what is your second choice?
Photography tips, for the amateur now, like, how to get a good photo. And
Tips on photography. Okay. Tips on photography. The first thing is know your camera a little bit. Always be prepared. Always have your camera set. You don't have to worry about what sort of film you got in it. Just worry about what your ISO is going to be. And don't always think, I have to run it manually. There's things called programs on them, or auto. If you just want to be prepared and want to be able to take a shot, put it on program or auto. But make sure you have it relatively set for your ISO, and just think about what you're shooting. Don't think you have to be like a TV camera and stick the camera in their face. It looks terrible. Stand back, compose it, make sure it's nicely cropped and bold, and make sure it's a happy picture, and make sure there's people in it. That is the main thing. I love having people in photographs, even a landscape. Even noticed lately, all your real estate magazines, they're starting to put people back in the pictures. They're getting so static and boring. They've got people in the pictures. It really works. Doesn't have to be real bold, but it works. Officially retired last month. I've actually been retired 4 years. In that last 4 years, I've covered the Australian Open 4 times, but I said now it's time to let the younger people take over. I've had my time and totally enjoyed it. But you never put down a camera. I looked at a new camera again the other day. I think, yes, I'm still going to buy it. I still like taking pictures. And my life now is really taking happy snaps of things I enjoyed, like stand-up paddleboarding and being out on the bay. It's a new experience to me, but from born in the country, I can live by the sea and take wonderful pictures and really enjoy, all the photography that I want to do, and not have to worry about a boss saying, oh, that's what I want, or it's not different to anybody else, but take how I enjoy pictures all the time. At the end of my career with Fairfax and then News Limited, I decided that it was time to retire. The old heart gave out and said it's time to retire, pull the pin. I've been a manager long enough. And I decided to have the sea change. I wanted to go back to the tropics. From the time when I lived in the Philippines, I always loved the tropics, but unfortunately the job kept me in Melbourne where it was cold. So to move to the Gold Coast 4 years ago and start that new life has been wonderful. And now, it's sort of living in the subtropics. All you want to do is be out on the water and take photos.